Welcome back, folks. I'm John Avi Socha, and this is Further Study Family Law, where we explore the laws that shape families one topic at a time. Now, marriage is a legal and social union between you, your partner, and the government. But the reality is, it doesn't always work out. Some marriages last decades, others begin and end during a single weekend in Vegas. What happens if your relationship does end is an important question for married couples and for couples considering getting married. What does a divorce look like? How do we divide assets? And what is the law's role in a stressful and emotionally volatile process? Ultimately, we think this requires further study. I have to warn you, we'll be making a lot of generalized simplifications in this episode, as every state has different divorce laws. We want you to know more about this system, but talk to a local attorney if you want specific guidance. Never take legal advice from YouTube, unless that advice is never take legal advice from YouTube. Marriage is more than just romance. It's shared Netflix passwords and arguing over who gets to shower first. Marriage is also a legal status bestowed by the government to recognize a relationship and to enshrine certain important rights between a couple. We went over this in more depth in our episode on marriage. A divorce is when a private citizen asks the government to dissolve their marriage and reset their marital status. You can ask for a divorce for literally any reason. This is true in all 50 states in the Union, but ask you must. You cannot end a marriage without government involvement. And no, texting the courthouse it's over doesn't count. So why does divorce matter? Well, accessible divorces are a vital tool for society. The process protects children from abusive homes, spouses from financial destitution, and people from being stuck in bad relationships. More broadly, you reap the social benefits of living in a society where the law can't force anyone to stay married to Rudy Giuliani. Divorce has three general pillars: financial asset division, child custody, and child support. Each serves a distinct purpose, but each is vital to the three-legged stool. In this episode, we will focus on the financial divisions in divorces and leave child parenting and support for another episode. These days, we have what's called a no-fault divorce system, meaning the state no longer has any interest in policing the why of the divorce, only the what and the how. Courts will make no determination on who is at fault for the failure of the marriage, and the assent of only one party is required to begin divorce proceedings. Irreconcilable differences is all the divorcee needs to cite, and there is nothing the other spouse can do to stop them. No matter the public fight they put up, you have a right to separate from anyone at any time for any personal reason. I can't stress this enough. In any state in the Union, you can get divorced for any reason, and the court will never ask you why. I'm sure they wish they could ask because, well, working at the courthouse is boring and gossip is fun. In their anguish, clients sometimes ask my team to stop their spouse from filing their divorce petition. Sorry, that's just not how it works. If you are in my office holding divorce papers, you are likely about to go through one of the hardest and most exhausting times of your life. And if a couple can't agree on the terms of their separation, your nosy neighbors are going to be able to find out a lot about you very quickly. Barring some narrow exceptions, everything you file in a divorce is fully accessible to anyone who wants to look it up, forever. You can go find Bill and Melinda Gates's and Mackenzie and Jeff Bezos's divorces in King County's court record database right now. But if you do look up their cases, you won't see many details. These couples kept nearly everything about themselves and their assets off of the public record. The chief concern we'll be discussing here in this episode is financial division. How your household's finances and debts are divided by the courts. There is a distinction to be made between community property states and separate property states, but we're going to be oversimplifying here to save everyone some time. In general, a court will examine the finances and debts of the household and make an equitable, not necessarily equal, division of your household's balance sheet. This includes cash, retirement accounts, real estate, boats, furniture, and if you're a millennial or younger, the three succulents that are dying on the windowsill. Also, you probably don't even own real estate, a boat, or a retirement account. Sorry about that. Factors to consider are the length of the marriage, the financial resources of each spouse, the working status of the parties during and before the relationship, and other life circumstances. But the important thing to know is that the court tries to be fair, even if it doesn't feel like it. An example, though there will be some payout, a court isn't likely to award a spouse 50% of everything the other spouse owned before the marriage if they're both in the workforce and have only been married for a year or two. A very short-term relationship. On the other hand, a stay-at-home mom of 40 years is probably going to get a significant settlement from her breadwinner husband. It's just the fair thing to do, especially if she sacrificed her career development to the household. In the same vein, alimony, also known as spousal support, is no longer the lifetime award it once was in the 1960s. Recognizing that most women are perfectly able to support themselves, judges often use alimony more as a transitionary tool to help disadvantaged spouses back on their feet. Payments that last long enough to go back to school or to find a new apartment to live in, seldom lasting more than a handful of years. And just like assets, debts are up for grabs too. A court generally looks at things like when the debt was acquired, what it was spent on, such as the household or going to school, who benefited from that debt, and each spouse's ability to pay the debt post-separation. Again, with an eye towards fairness. How debts are divided up usually ends up as a careful counterbalance to the asset awards. For example, maybe you get the house, but you're also burdened with the mortgage, while your ex loses the house, but gets to walk away debt-free. Maybe your former spouse gets the credit card debt, but also gets a larger share of your 401k. Maybe your spouse gets the broken Harley Davidson, while you take the medical bills from your motorcycle accident. The state has a vested interest in adults being able to support themselves. And a society where one or more adults are left destitute after dividing a household is not one we want to live in. While this may seem unsatisfyingly vague and squishy, the simple reality is that everyone's life is different. There is often no perfect manual because the law knows it needs to be clear enough to be of use, but flexible enough to be fair to as many people as possible. Flexibility is important when handling the unique circumstances of a specific relationship. All that said, whatever you and your spouse agree to as fair and equitable across your finances and debts is generally assumed to be so. If you can come to a private agreement, the court tends to not second-guess you. Keep this in mind. There is one categorical exception that can apply: separate property. Separate property is property you brought into marriage with you or was acquired separately during your marriage. If you were a millionaire when you got married and you put that million in an account that never interacted with the household, then you might be able to presumptively exclude it from any marital asset division. It was yours before, and that way it shall remain. Similarly, if you inherited money from a family member during your marriage, that tends to also be considered separate property. You can keep your great uncle's baseball cards. The reasoning generally goes that you and your spouse never worked as a team to earn or manage those funds, and thus those assets remain yours. Though this does not always hold if you commingle your marital assets and your separate ones, so take care to speak with a lawyer when structuring complex finances. Just note that courts can still divide separate property at their discretion, but the protections tend to be stronger if you keep any separate funds strictly segregated. Again, the question of fairness hangs over every decision made in a family law proceeding, and the arm of the law is long. Courts tend to favor function over form. Now, many can rightly argue that the outcome of the courts is not often just. Trust me, I've seen some things. But the theoretical objective when dividing assets and debts is to ensure that both spouses are well positioned for new lives after separation. Sometimes that means you won't get exactly what you want, like the car or the TV or the cat. Remember, the courts are not there to protect you or your spouse, but society writ large. Today, we learned about financial considerations in divorces, assets, debts, separate property, and the objectives of the court when reviewing financial concerns. As we move forward, take a moment to reflect on the reality of divorce. Behind every stack of paperwork is someone navigating one of the most challenging transitions of their life. And that person, and their ex, deserves empathy and care. In our next episode, we'll dive into child custody and support. I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching this episode of Further Study, which was filmed at our studio in Toronto, Canada. Support Further Study on Patreon to keep our content free for anyone who wants to learn.